So, welcome. This session focuses a lot on the special love relationship. And it was interesting because I was listening to it on audio beforehand, and I think I understand it. Or I understand the hidden truth about special relationships that is might be a surprise to us all if we were to understand the basis for it. Because the special love relationship has an element that is hidden, that is underground and out of sight, meaning it's not something that occurs to our conscious mind. And according to the Course of Miracles, this is something that humanity has not recognized there. But to heal, it is essential to bring this out of the darkness and into sight so that we don't have these hidden aspects of our subconscious mind. And when we do that, then healing can begin when we bring that which was hidden out into the light. So my experience with the special relationship and understanding it and applying it to my life is it comes slowly over time. It doesn't come all in one setting. But boy, that would be really great if some of you could get it all at once. That would be a real gift. So let's see what happens. The section that we're reading is titled The Choice for Completion. Notice it says it's a choice. It's a choice between doing it the ego's way or doing it according to the Holy Spirit. Both are prompting us with a promise of completion, but that means something entirely different to each one of them. So hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader for this session is Julie.
In looking at the special relationship, it is necessary first to realize that it involves a great amount of pain. Anxiety, despair, guilt, and attack all enter into it, broken into by periods in which they seem to be gone. All these must be understood for what they are. Whatever form they take, they are always an attack on the self to make the other guilty. I have spoken of this before, but there are some aspects of what is really being attempted that have not been touched upon. Very simply, the attempt to make guilty is always directed against God, for the ego would have you see him and him alone as guilty, leaving the sonship open to attack and unprotected from it. The special love relationship is the ego's chief weapon for keeping you from heaven. It does not appear to be a weapon, but if you consider how you value it and why, you will realize what it must be.
Mm-hmm. So what was just provided to us are a series of attributes which are claimed here to be associated with a special relationship. Just to quickly review, and most of this is unknown to the conscious mind, that these relationships involve an attack on oneself. It involves making the other feel guilty. The guilt is directed against God. I'm angry at God. And it is used as a weapon by the ego to keep you from awareness of heaven. So these are all attributes, but what I've often found lacking is it doesn't give me an understanding of why or how that came about. It doesn't it says that this is true, but only later on in two or three more paragraphs does it lay out the exact chain of errors that lead up to this situation. And so I'm really pleased that we'll have a chance to look at that so that it all will make sense to your mind. For the mind needs it to be, these statements to be reasonable to you in order for you to accept them. Otherwise, you're just accepting a bunch of ideas that make no sense to your internal logic. And so we want to decode that logic, but we have to get to that point here. So just remember here, because this will come up later on, that special relationship is a way of attacking yourself, making the other person feel guilty. Its guilt is directed against God, and the ego uses this as a weapon to keep you from heaven.
The special love relationship is the ego's most boasted gift, and one which has the most appeal to those unwilling to relinquish guilt. The dynamics of the ego are clearest here, for counting on the attraction of this offering, the fantasies that center around it are often quite overt. Here, they are usually judged to be acceptable and even natural. No one considers it bizarre to love and hate together. And even those who believe that hate is sin merely feel guilty, but do not correct it. This is the natural condition of the separation. And those who learn that it is not natural at all seem to be the unnatural ones. For this world is the opposite of heaven, being made to be its opposite, and everything here takes a direction exactly opposite of what is true. In heaven, where the meaning of love is known, love is the same as union. Here, where the illusion of love is accepted in love's place, love is perceived as separation and exclusion.
Mm-hmm. So, for one, this statement that is bolded here, in heaven, the meaning of love is known, where love is the same as union. It's helpful, I believe, to understand the meaning of love as presented in the Course, to know this statement. In heaven, love is viewed as perfect union. Happens to be union with everyone and everything, but it's a perfect union. Then from that, we can contrast with what love is often presented as here in this world, where, and I'll just cite one example, where if two people fall in love, there is oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, an underlying fear that the other person may not love me the way I love them, or a betrayal if all of a sudden the other person decides, well, maybe they don't really love you that much. Let's just be friends. And so there's this underlying fear that this will not be the perfect union that your ideals look for. And the Course calls that a mixture of love and fear. And that's always a symptom of anything that the ego, it calls it the ego's most boasted gift, is always a symptom, is a mixture of the opposites, the promise of a perfect love, along with the fear that this may not be everything that I hoped it would be. And there's many other examples that one can cite about the nature of special relationships, because again, this is a weapon that the ego uses. And we have a new way of referring to what is natural. In previous sections in this chapter, we read what is natural to God is natural to all of creation and is part of your nature as well. If it's natural to God, it's natural to everything and everyone. Well, if we shift into the ego domain, the ego will reuse that word to say that separation is natural. And it's natural. This is the great lie, and that it's natural to have some anxiety along with love, to have fear and love together. So it has its own narrative of what it claims is natural, and that is entirely different than the use of the Holy Spirit's interpretation of natural. Again, my assertion is that every word in A Course in Miracles has two interpretations, the way the ego views it and the way the Holy Spirit views it. And as you know, those two never align. They're opposite of one another. David, did you have a comment? No? Okay. All right, so let's go on.
It is in the special relationship born of the hidden wish for special love from God that the ego's hatred triumphs. For the special relationship is the renunciation of the love of God and the attempt to secure for the self the specialness that he denied. It is essential to the preservation of the ego that you believe this specialness is not hell, but heaven. For the ego would never have you see that separation could only be loss, being the one condition in which heaven could not be.
Mm-hmm. Here it is. This is the explanation. For miracle students, I would have you memorize or certainly understand and fully appreciate the logic and spiritual reasoning that is encapsulated in these first two sentences. We're going to break it down in just a minute, because from that, everything else is built upon this foundation. This is where it starts. And all the effects that we read in the first paragraph all emanate from this mistake. And so the beginning of this is the desire, hidden, again, unconscious, that God would love me in a special way and choose me apart from others and bless me uniquely. This is sometimes taught in the modern era to millions and millions of people, that if you have wealth, that is a special blessing from God. And there are other ways in which people would express that God has blessed us uniquely. So, but it takes many forms, but the core idea is a desire, a secret wish that God would treat you preferentially, preferred above all others, that you be the special people. It's a special love from God. And so that's a wish. And what happens to that wish? It gets frustrated. It doesn't happen. God winds up being no respecter of persons and treating all love as unconditional for everyone. And so it winds up being frustrated wish for special treatment. And then the ego, okay, frustration is an ego reaction to anything. And then the ego kicks in from there and says, well, if I'm not going to get special love from God, what am I going to do? I'm going to go find it from somebody else. Can you see that logic? If God does not love me specially, it leaves what feels like a hole in the soul. And since I can't get that fulfilled by the Creator, then I'm going to go elsewhere outside of myself and find it. And so that then leads us to renounce the idea of our unconditional love by God. Again, this is an ego oriented view of our relationship to God. It's not the truth, but it results in the further mistake of saying, well, I'm not going to get loved by God. I'm going to find love elsewhere. And so it's like a divorcement from the idea of God's love. And I've tried to summarize it here. Failing to attain a special love from God, you exchange that. That's what it is. It's an exchange that pursues special love from outside, believing that if you find that love outside, the ego has triumphed. I've got the love that I want. Now, I know that's a lot, but this is the basis, the very basis for what the Course teaches, that when the ego uses this experience as a weapon, it's the ego's gift. And the ego never has good intentions, so it uses it as a weapon. And from this, all your frustrations and anxieties and despair regarding special relationships emanate. Oh, and by the way, it's self-reinforcing of the idea of separation from God, because by the very definition, I didn't get the love I wanted from God, so I went elsewhere, so I separated away. And you will see the effects of the byproducts of this assumption written into many narratives that have been used throughout in the world. Okay, so that's where it all began. Julie, what is the truth?
To everyone, heaven is completion. There can be no disagreement on this because both the ego and the Holy Spirit accept it. They are, however, in complete disagreement on what completion is and how it is accomplished. The Holy Spirit knows that completion lies first in union and then in the extension of union. To the ego, completion lies in triumph and in the extension of the victory, even to the final triumph over God. In this, it sees the ultimate freedom of self, for nothing would remain to interfere with the ego. This is its idea of heaven. And therefore, union, which is a condition in which the ego cannot interfere, must be hell.
All right, so herein is the title. There's a choice for completion. That choice is the Holy Spirit's version of completion or the ego's version of completion. And it's necessary, if you're going to understand the Course in Miracles, that you understand the Holy Spirit's point of view. It's not essential that you be aware of all of what the ego is up to, but it is essential that you understand the direction Holy Spirit calls you. We read a moment ago that in heaven, love is union. The Holy Spirit knows that completion lies first in union and then the further extension of union. You become an extender. That's the word that came to me, like a salesperson for union. You become someone that deals in the union, becomes vital. So the ego, though, would then has a counter narrative to the Holy Spirit's, which is more vicious. It's a victory and a final triumph over God. It's a conquering type attitude, and it calls that heaven. It would have you think that your heaven is in learning to do without God, to try to find the love that you want without reference to God. Who needs God if we can find all the love we want here in somebody else? So this kind of alternative union is what the ego would convince you to spend your life in quest of. If this is not making sense, please stop, question. We'll try to untangle it, because from here on, it goes into assuming you accept most of that, of what has been said. What can we do about it to heal? What can we do, Julie?
The special relationship is a strange and unnatural ego device for joining hell and heaven and making them indistinguishable. And the attempt to find the imagined best of both worlds has merely led to fantasies of both and to the inability to perceive either as it is. The special relationship is the triumph of this confusion. It is a kind of union from which union is excluded, and the basis for the attempt at union rests on exclusion. What better example could there be of the ego's maxim, seek but do not find?
Okay. This is what the ego does many times, is it promises that there's something out there that you would make you happy, would be worth your efforts to find, but its goal is to keep you permanently in seeking mode. Seek but do not find. So it's ultimately frustrating, the desire, but it keeps you questing. The Buddhists call it grasping, wanting to get more of something to complete the incompletion that one feels within. We're going to turn more within in a moment, because that's where the real issues lie, is how do you feel within your inner world. But the ego would orient you to the outer quest to find something out there. And its chief tool is to make things indistinguishable, spiritual things indistinguishable. So I'll give a few examples so that you cannot distinguish between love and fear, cannot distinguish between guilt and innocence, cannot distinguish between illusions and reality, cannot distinguish between yourself and others. So the Holy Spirit counters that by helping you to make distinctions. That is her chief teaching device, is that you would be able to understand yourself, the distinction between that which is false, that which is true, between that which is guilty and that which is innocence. And only then can you exert a true choice. Can you imagine trying to make a choice where you can't distinguish one from the other? That's not a choice, that's just guess. But if you can make a clear distinction and realize I can follow the guidance of the ego or I can follow the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and I see that they are very different, then you can make a free will choice. And so part of what's being done in this reading is helping us to understand, distinguish what it is that is being offered in the special relationship versus what's being offered in the holy relationship, to make that distinction. And that's going to be one that you ultimately make on the inner plane rather than the outer world.
Most curious of all is the concept of the self which the ego fosters in the special relationship. This self seeks the relationship to make itself complete. Yet when it finds the special relationship in which it thinks it can accomplish this, it gives itself away and tries to trade itself for the self of another. This is not union, for there is no increase and no extension. Each partner tries to sacrifice the self he does not want for one he thinks he would prefer, and he feels guilty for the sin of taking and of giving nothing of value in return. How much value can he place upon a self that he would give away to get a better one? The better self the ego seeks is always one that is more special. And whoever seems to possess a special self is loved for what can be taken from him. Where both partners see this special self in each other, the ego sees a union made in heaven. For neither one will recognize that he has asked for hell, and so he will not interfere with the ego's illusions of heaven, which it offered him to interfere with heaven. Yet if all illusions are of fear, and they can be of nothing else, the illusion of heaven is nothing more than an attractive form of fear, in which the guilt is buried deep and rises in the form of love.
Mm-hmm. So this becomes very psychological, and I thought I would try to illustrate this dynamic by sharing a bit of a personal story, but I think in many ways it's everyone's story. And I can easily relate to it when I think in terms of my adolescent self. So let's say I'm 15 or 16 years old and believing that there's some girl out there that can offer me the tenderness and affection and appreciation that I really feel I'm missing. And my own self-concept is not well formed as yet, not really confident in that self, feeling a bit insecure, a bit inadequate, maybe don't have all the gifts that other young men can offer. And so in the special relationship, one seeks to trade one's self-concept for the idealized love of the other self. Said another way, I look to someone else who I think is perfect and most loving, and in joining with that person, we're going to join together and I'm going to offer myself and they're going to offer their self. Only deep down inside, I know I'm getting the better end of the deal. because myself is not so perfect. Matter of fact, I've got some serious questions about my own self, but the other person is really amazing. And so I'm trading up. Well, that's perhaps easy to understand in the context of adolescence. But what if the fundamentals of the way one sees oneself and the way one fantasizes the other person to be never really change, no matter what age you are? And so each partner tries to sacrifice the self he does not want for the one he thinks he would prefer, and feels guilty for this trade. Can you imagine trading something of very low value for something of very high value? You know you're not being fair to the other person, feels guilty for giving nothing of value in return. Now, it's easier to think of this in terms of the extremes. We're not saying that each and every instance of encounters in the human race exactly follow this pattern, but we are saying psychologically they all have these issues of a sense of inadequacy that is joining together with someone else who's believed to offer something that we do not have, in the belief that we'll feel complete. Finally, I will get the thing that I most need in life to feel whole and complete. The ego self always seeks one that is more special. And so that's, by the way, I was speaking of the idealized beginning of a relationship, not of how it might look 5 years later, but this might be the fantasy notions that go through one's mind. So I'll be right up front. I've noticed my mind automatically when I encounter someone that I think they might be a partner material. My mind immediately goes into storytelling about things that have not happened, and expectations of what the future might be. That's a fantasy. It doesn't have to be a sexual fantasy. It can be based on that content, but it's really just making up what a future with this perfect person might be. And all of this is a setup for disappointment. And I'm sure it'll bring that up in the next paragraph, if not later on.
The appeal of hell lies only in the terrible attraction of guilt, which the ego holds out to those who place their faith in littleness. The conviction of littleness lies in every special relationship, for only the deprived could value specialness. The demand for specialness and the perception of the giving of specialness as an act of love would make love hateful. The real purpose of the special relationship, in strict accordance with the ego's goals, is to destroy reality and substitute illusion. For the ego is itself an illusion, and only illusions can be the witnesses to its reality.
Mm-hmm. So the word littleness is introduced here, and also the sense of the deprived. So the context here is in entering into, and the beginning stages is easiest to understand, a relationship. All of one's inadequacies and uncertainties, self condemnation and debasement generally you try to hide and disguise from the other person. It's unlikely that you would, on the very first few encounters with someone, tell them all about your battered self-concept. That's not a way that people typically would represent themselves. You'd rather represent yourself in your very best self. Um, and I'm not endorsing any of that. I'm just pointing out, I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm just pointing out that that's what's often done. But secretly, what one is doing is thinking of themselves in terms of lower value, trying to find a relationship with higher value. It's a deprived self concept. Only the deprived could value specialness, meaning if you know your true self, you would never feel deprived at all, your true holy self. You would never feel deprived, you would feel abundant, nor would you feel the need for a special relationship because you would realize that you have holy relationships really with anyone and everyone. Every encounter you have is an opportunity for a holy encounter. So, two different goals here. And if this is a little hard on special relationships, it does seem that way often because in our society, these things are idealized and held to be the most promising of opportunities. Um, if it's done, if it feels like that, know that the real reason here is to help you distinguish between the holy relationship and the special relationship.
If you perceived the special relationship as a triumph over nor my apologies, as a triumph over God, would you want it? Let us not think of its fearful nature, nor of the guilt it must entail, nor of the sadness and the loneliness. For these are only attributes of the whole religion of separation and of the total context in which it is thought to occur. The central theme in its litany to sacrifice is that God must die so you can live. And it is this theme that is acted out in the special relationship. Though the death of yourself you think you can attack through the death of yourself, you think you can attack another self and snatch it from the other to replace the self that you despise. And you despise it because you do not think it offers the specialness that you demand. And hating it, you have made it little and unworthy because you are afraid of it.
So, all of this is said to be activity that is almost entirely in the subconscious mind, although it can be made conscious. But for most people, they are clueless as to what's being talked about here. They Most people, if you ask them to write 3 pages of their self-concept, they would have difficulty filling 1 page because or if they were able to put together words, they would be largely based on the illusions they have of themselves. Um, so the context here is one feels as though God did not love me in a special way. Why? Because I must not be lovable. This is the lie that we tell. And therefore, I must be somehow flawed, inadequate, or in some way not valued. Nevertheless, I'm going to triumph over this rejection by God by finding somebody that will love me. And so this becomes an ego drive to find somebody that will love me because I can't find it from God. So the story goes. And this becomes an entire religion of separation and has many attributes that stem from it. People can commit murder by being frustrated in these arenas and have been known to. So, but ultimately, it stems from the original state, which is a belief that we didn't get the love from God, and therefore we're going to separate from God and prove him wrong by finding what appears to be an earthly love of our own. Steve, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I think I mentioned to you in my readings of Disappearance of the Universe, they talk specifically about this and how the most successful grasping of these concepts come from people like ourselves, more mature people. Could you imagine trying to absorb this as a 20-year-old and how difficult it would be in today's life to try to develop a relationship with someone and having to apply what we learn in here to that would be almost impossible.
Yeah. So, not to make this about me, Steve, but I got the Course in Miracles right before my 21st birthday and read all these things.
Wow.
Although I believed in the Course in Miracles, I internally rejected what it said. The way I dealt with it was by rejecting and not accepting these ideas. That was my coping mechanism.
Right.
So, yes, as to your point, very difficult to live in our world as a young person with these ideas. Okay, let's go on.
How can you grant unlimited power to what you think you have attacked? So fearful has the truth become to you that unless it is weak and little and unworthy of value, you would not dare to look upon it. You think it safer to endow the little self you made with power you wrested from truth, triumphing over it and leaving it helpless. See how exactly is this ritual enacted in the special relationship. An altar is erected in between two separate people on which each seeks to kill his self and on his body raise another self to take its power from his death. Over and over and over, this ritual is enacted, and it is never completed, nor ever will be completed. The ritual of completion cannot complete, for life arises not from death, nor heaven from hell.
Mm-hmm. So again, this is in the ego context, and the central idea here being that one attempts having a flawed self-concept to endow the little self you made with power. This is what I call puffery. Although I feel inadequate and unloved, I'm going to try to empower that self to be better, to be more appreciated, more lovable, not fundamentally change, but instead just put on a powerful appearance. And so this further splits the self between the way you see yourself quietly and internally and the way you present yourself externally. And that might work during a courtship or an engagement, but eventually the little self within comes out. And that's when typically we call it the end of the honeymoon period. That's when you realize that you've got something different. You're in a relationship that's different from the one you idealized when you went in. They call it here a ritual that occurs again and again, a ritual of completion, but it's completion in the ego sense, not in the Holy Spirit sense of completion that emerges from union and the extension of union. Julie, you had your hand up. You're muted, dear.
Thank you. This might not be entirely relevant, but I have a couple people in the 12-step program that I meet with and talk about things with. And one of them wanted to get together tonight, and it was a spontaneous request. And so they know that I have miracles, from 7 to 8. And then my plan tonight was to watch Monday Night Football, which I don't do often, but this week, something I wanted to do. And so, rather than say I'm not available or make something up, I thought, well, what would happen if I just told the truth, Um, the truth was I'd rather do it Tuesday because after miracles, I want to watch football, which is not saying anything in the neighborhood of I don't like you, I don't value you, I don't you know what I mean? Today I know that, and it just was a pleasure for me to just be able to tell the truth because I knew it wasn't attack. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really good. Learning to say not tonight or sorry, I can't do that without attacking the other. Yeah. Susie?
How nice this looks.
I just have to piggyback on Julie and say that the course has helped me do that so much more. I could so relate. Plus the fact I'm going to watch Monday Night Football too. But I'm aware now that Susie wants to kind of fudge the truth, but my higher self is like, well, it's okay to be truthful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Julie, it's the saying, say what you mean what you say, don't say it mean.
Yeah. Yeah, truthful, and I would add, well, I'm learning to be truthful and kind at the same time. Because before I was truthful, but not so kind.
Whenever any form of special relationship tempts you to seek for love in ritual, remember love is content and not form of any kind. The special relationship is a ritual of form aimed at raising the form to take the place of God at the expense of content. There is no meaning in the form, and there will never be. The special relationship must be recognized for what it is, a senseless ritual in which strength is extracted from the death of God and invested in his killer as the sign that form has triumphed over content and love has lost its meaning. Would you want this to be possible, even apart from its evident impossibility? If it were possible, you would have made yourself helpless. God is not angry. He merely could not let this happen. You cannot change his mind. No rituals that you have set up in which the dance of death delights you can bring death to the eternal. Nor can your chosen substitute for the wholeness of God have any influence at all upon it.
So I don't know that I followed all of that in terms of being able to offer anything to it, but I did follow this statement. Remember, love is content and not form of any kind, meaning that the type of love that the Holy Spirit teaches does not follow a prescribed pattern. It's not dictated by the norms that might be popularized by advertisers or movies or our culture. That love shows up in many unexpected ways that would not traditionally be labeled as love. For me, anytime you are really care about another person and are kind towards them, just like Julie, okay, you say to someone, no, I can't meet tonight, but you say it kindly, that's a loving gesture because you're taking into account the other person's feelings as well. So love is never a prescribed form, but the ego would have you think and believe that love fits this narrow definition, this ritualistic pattern of behavior that you've seen again and again. And just know that the love the Holy Spirit teaches is universal and takes all kinds of forms of expression. Noelle?
I have two comments. One is that the special relationship is usually made more complicated because both people are looking for that same bolstering, shoring up sense of adequacy and thinking that the other person will give it to them. And as you point out, after the honeymoon period is often a cold water awakening. The other thing is, in terms of what Julie and Susie were both saying, telling the truth, yes. And I often, if the words don't come to me easily, I often ask Holy Spirit, how can I say this most gently? And I always get an answer. And then the other person accepts it and we just go on. And or maybe confesses something truthful themselves.
Nice. Thank you, Noelle. Yeah, to support what Noelle just said, you've heard it said here, you might say to someone, where's your other half? Where is your partner, your other half? And it's the notion I was only half a person until I found my partner. And then you've heard this saying, two halves make a whole, referred to relationships. It's a sense I was only half a self. I wasn't a whole self. And now I found another half self, and at least together we add up to a whole. Even in those words, it's describing what I think, having read what we did this evening, you can tell that those are clues of an inadequate self concept, a broken self two broken selves add up to a complete self, or some kind of nonsense such as that.
See in the special relationship nothing more than a meaningless attempt to raise other gods before him, and by worshiping them to obscure their tininess in his greatness. In the name of your completion, you do not want this. For every idol that you raise to place before him stands before you in place of what you are.
So on a previous session, Susie pointed out that these special relationships aren't always with people. They can be with things or fantasies of what it might be like if I were the richest person in the world, or what it might be like if I had 1,million followers on some social media, or whatever form. It's not always in the classic sense that we mean it here. And so what the Course says, it refers it to here, to raise other gods with a small g. These are idols, by worshiping them. And that reminds me of a really great party, classic epical party of the past. Maybe you saw the movie, The 10 Commandments. And for those of you that have forgotten, Moses went up into the mountains to talk to God and had an encounter with the burning bush, and then got the 10 Commandments up there. And while he was away, the people feared to be by themselves. And the other person, their alternate leader, proposed that they make another god. They come up with form a golden calf and worship it. And so that is the epic story. But in many ways, what I'm trying to do is draw a parallel to each and every one of us in the modern era, that we still wind up with our own idols, things that we make our other gods of. And that can be another person or another thing or another experience. And all of them are intended to be substitutes, to try to find completion with our idols, rather than the completion that we find with the Creator. Very powerful. That, talk about a distinction. That's like huge.
Salvation lies in the simple fact that illusions are not fearful because they are not true. They but seem to be fearful to the extent to which you fail to recognize them for what they are, and you will fail to do this to the extent to which you want them to be true. And to the same extent you are denying truth, and so are failing to make the simple choice between truth and illusion, God and fantasy. Remember this, and you will have no difficulty in perceiving the decision as just what it is, and nothing more.
Right here in this simple paragraph describes the fundamental conflict, which is one, our illusions. Each one of us has our own illusions, and embedded in that is a sense of fear, because we believe the illusion to be true. And why do we believe the illusion to be true? The answer is right here on the page. Because we want them to be true. We want our illusions to be true. We want our idols to make us happy. This is a disorder of desire directing our desires towards our idols and our self-made illusions. And so that's what the undoing of the ego narrative must accomplish, is that we fall in love. Instead of being in love with our idols and illusions, we fall in love with the gifts of creation.
The core of the separation illusion lies simply in the fantasy of destruction of love's meaning. And unless love's meaning is restored to you, you cannot know yourself who share its meaning. Separation is only the decision not to know yourself. This whole thought system is a carefully contrived learning experience designed to lead away from truth and into fantasy. Yet for every learning that would hurt you, God offers you correction and complete escape from all its consequences. The decision whether or not to listen to this course and follow it is but the choice between truth and illusion. For here is truth, separated from illusion and not confused with it at all. How simple does this choice become when it is perceived as only what it is? For only fantasies make confusion in choosing possible, and they are totally unreal. This year is thus the time to make the easiest decision that ever confronted you, and also the only one. You will cross the bridge into reality simply because you will recognize that God is on the other side, and nothing at all is here. It is impossible not to make the natural decision as this is realized.
So we read in a previous section that this is a course in knowing yourself. And here it elaborates that we know from reading that the Creator created us in out of an act of love. And so we were brought into being by love, and love is our nature. But if our mind is turned upside down and distorted as to what love really is, then until love's meaning is restored, you cannot know yourself. Say that one more time. Although love is your eternal nature, when the level confusion, your eternal nature is spiritual, but your mind, conscious mind, thinking love is to be found outside and is missing, and then that winds up confusing the mind. And until the mind is corrected and knows again the meaning of love, you cannot know your true self. You wind up instead believing yourself to be something other than perfect love. And then from that, the entire cascade into trying to find an external love it emanates. And that's what the special relationship is all based on, is a cascading set of lies, thinking that love is to be found outside of you. Steve?
Yeah, so this whole concept was disturbing, very disturbing to me when I first read it, because from a personal aspect, much of the drive that I had as a 20-year-old to succeed was based upon this false concept of being like the other person who succeeded that I had in my mind, and everything was built on that, and instead of where it should have been built. But this whole piece on special relationships, and this specifically, it was very disturbing to me, and it took me a long time to understand. I still struggle with it a little bit, but it's a great concept, and I've been really applying myself to it.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, and I understand your disturbance. Like I said, I rejected it. I knew that I was not willing to live by it when I was in my early 20s. And so and that conflict between reading it but not being willing to live by it ultimately resulted, and I said, I got to put this aside because I couldn't stand that conflict going on within me. But I also promised myself I would pick it up again when the time came. Heather?
Yeah, in some ways it's kind of funny to me, now that we see it for what it is. And I was thinking about how, it says in the course that things start with a tiny mad idea. I'm thinking, well, my God, this special relationship thing is our greatest, enormous, crazy idea. It's like our whole philosophy in this world is about finding that special relationship. So I just was kind of funny to me to think how we've elevated this into something is completely a fantasy. So that's all.
And I'll thank you, Heather. And I'll underscore that prior to that madness, what we read today was the belief I'll find God will love me in a special way, that more than all the others. And he'll bestow a special love on me. And then when that gets frustrated, they decide to look elsewhere. And then we look to the special relationship to fill that hole in our soul. And so I think for those who are willing to follow along and believe in that logic, I think it finally makes sense to my mind. That's how we got into this twisted psychological orientation of a depraved self trying to find love externally. And I have studied psychology extensively. None of them talked about this. None of them had the types of insights that we read just this evening. Lauren?
Yeah, so what I was wondering as we were going through that is, why is there this hole in our soul that we're striving to fill? And the only, based on the teachings, I'm assuming it has to do with that tiny mad idea that we separated ourselves from God. And okay.
Yeah. There's not actually a hole in your soul, but there is a strong belief illusion that there's a hole in the soul because of the whole separation. I mean, divorced from the source of all love, you would feel like there's a hole in your soul. If you felt yourself outside the circle of love in some kind of dark, empty environment, you would feel really needy, really deprived. But that's what the big lie is all about, is convincing you that is the situation. So yes, it started out as a tiny mad idea, and look how big it's gotten. Yeah. All right, friends. This was an amazing read, and I want to honor the courage that each of you have in your willingness to address these things and look at them again in this new light. and allow them to enter into your mind and continue to grow. Like I said, for me, this has been a long journey around this topic in particular. So be gentle with yourself in the learning and understanding. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you, Julie, for your reading. And we look forward to connecting again soon. Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you, everyone.
Namaste. Thank you, Julie.
You're
Enjoy your
welcome.
football.
Thanks, Brett. Have a
you.
great night, everyone.
Everyone have a blessed night.
Have a good night.
Good night.